and welcome back, everyone. This is Ben Chiriboga, the Chief Growth Officer here at Nexo, coming to you with another This Legal Life. Today, I am very, very excited to be speaking with Varun Bahl, the CFO of Procopio. Varun, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm doing well, and yeah, so I couldn't complain.
Yes, amazing. So today we're going to be, well, on the substantive part, all the listeners who have been listening to This Legal Life, first of all, we very much appreciate you. But you know that This Legal Life really gets into the backgrounds of people, how they have made their way into the legal industry. Very few people, except maybe for lawyers, decided that they want to get into the legal industry. But everybody has an interesting story. And we're going to get into Varun's story about how he made it into the legal industry. And then, very exciting, we're going to talk about legal pricing, law firm pricing, and pricing, I think, in a new way. So you're going to have to stay tuned. I'm not going to get into it, but Varun, why don't we start with, for those of you who don't know you, you have a CFO, COO background, and before getting into legal, you were outside of legal, and we want to retell your story about how you got into legal. We're going to get into pricing, but yeah, tell us a little bit about your background, and get personal. Think about the time that you were making your way in, what you learned as you were entering into this industry. Yeah, we want to know a little bit about your legal life.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ben. I hope I don't get too personal, but yeah, let's talk about 2007. That's when I graduated with an MBA, right? And when you asked me then what I wanted to do with my life, legal was not part of the picture. I just had no idea that I'd be working in legal for most of my adult life after that, right? It was not there. I graduated with an MBA and I got into pricing strategy, right? Immediately after that, financial analysis, pricing strategy, um, and found myself, a few years working for LexisNexis as a pricing manager. And as I did that, I put together, a pricing strategy for them, packaging strategy. I got promoted as the director of strategy very soon when I was in LexisNexis. And when I was the director of strategy, that's when my introduction to the legal world happened, right? As LexisNexis, we were building products for law firms, right? Typically, and one of my roles was to, go and interview a number of attorneys, in North America to understand what their pain was, their pain points, their unmet needs, so that we could structure the right products for them, right? That was the intention behind that. And in those conversations, what I learned was that one of the biggest pain points that attorneys had was around pricing. And they were always pressured by clients to provide fixed prices, and they just didn't know how to do it. They're like, we just cannot. Our business does not do fixed prices. And everything's unpredictable. We don't know what it depends, on a lot of factors and all of that. And they were just they were just talking about their frustrations, right? And I was just listening, and but there was a pattern. Like, I interviewed 200 attorneys, so there was a definite pattern here on pain around pricing. And that's when I realized that, look, deep in my heart, I realized there's something out here that I want to do, right? And I didn't know what to do about it because Lexus wasn't going to build pricing products. And I knew deep inside that you've got to be inside these law firms to build those products, right? Because the data is inside the law firms, it's not outside. And so I left it out there. I didn't do anything about it. The thought was there, in the universe somewhere. And a few years later, an opportunity came up in Faskin, one of the largest law firms in Canada, for a director of pricing, and they wanted some from outside to come in and put together best practices in pricing. I applied for the role, and since then, I've been in the legal industry. Um, I was there for a few years as the director of pricing. Something came up in Wilson Sonsini in California. I went on there, as the director of pricing and legal project management as well. Few years later, you know, another opportunity came up on the east side. It was hard to turn down, where I applied, for a CEO role, and I took on the role to manage a law firm, which is quite exciting. And now I'm the CFO of Procopio. So it's been a bit of you know, a pathway for me, going from one winding path, but it's been wonderful. And the one thing constant in all these you know pit stops have has been the need for change, right? I've come from a you know mentality of changing things, right? I have. And initially it was pricing. Pricing was the medium to change things, right? And soon it developed into operations, and now it's more like finance, right? And I've held that, yeah, I've held the need to change, that very close to my heart, so to speak. So yeah, it's that's really been where that's been my focus. And so I've been here now in the legal industry for the last 15 years, and in the center of change. Uh, yeah, if operations, finance, pricing, I don't know what to call it sometimes, but it's just called change in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Take us back to at the time where you were moving from LexisNexis in house in Fasken. Take us back a little bit because I think it'll be a good history lesson to what was the conversation around pricing then? I think this was at least 15 years ago. AFAs maybe were in the conversation, but yeah, take us back. Change happens so quickly now. And in some sense, it's like short term, it doesn't happen enough, but long term, it happens in incredible sort of spurts. What was the conversation like then? And then particularly, how did you feel about the pricing situation at that sort of time? Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a good question. We've evolved quite a bit. The pricing conversation in the legal industry has evolved quite a bit since 2008, right? Even before I had those conversations in LexisNexis. It all started in 2008, right? Before I even had those conversations. That's when we had that crash, right? Lehman Brothers crash. And clients were all about, we're spending too much on legal. We need discounts, we need predictability, give us fixed prices. Like, if you think about it, everything that you spend on today is value-based pricing. You buy anything in the market, there's a price on it, right? The legal world is the only world where you pay by the hour for something that's unpredictable. And I think that's really there's a lot of pressure by clients to give us some predictability. We've been with you for the longest time, you have our loyalty, just tell us what the bills would be beforehand. So when I had those conversations in 2012, it was all about providing fixed prices, right? How can we provide fixed prices at that moment? The word AFA also had just started to come up, alternative fee arrangement, which is really an alternative to the billing model, to the hourly model, right? And there was a lot of creativity there, right? Creativity around fixed prices, flat fees, packages, holdbacks, success fees, price collars, so many different kinds of AFAs. Fantastic. It was good to see that creativity that came out in the legal industry because of that in that area, right? And it was great. I think it took on, but soon that conversation moved on. It moved on to value-based pricing, right? So no, what in value-based pricing is essentially pricing legal services, something other than just by the hour, right? And so the challenge became, how do you monetize value in a law firm, right? If it's not by the hour. Lawyers were never pressured to monetize value, right, for clients. They just send the bill by. They worked for it for 10 hours, they send the bill for 10 hours. They work for 20 hours, they send the bill for 20 hours. But really, were they ever asked, what's the value of what are you working on, and how is that going to benefit me as a client? They were never asked that question. And now that conversation started to change to value-based pricing. And I think the mandate and the work internally for the pricing professionals started to become, okay, we need to quantify and put a value around the legal services that we are delivering, right? And it's no longer about putting a price there, but let's try and see how we can best communicate this value. First, put it in structures, and then communicate the value that we're delivering as a law firm. And that became, that was a central piece of the agenda then. This moved on to value-based marketing, value-based selling. Obviously, lawyers were starting to sell in that way as well. And that was, and around then, I think we started to talk about infrastructure. If this is the way we're going to do things, what's the investment in infrastructure? How are we going to monetize value, right, internally? Cost predictability was still a problem. Cost predictability, right? And a lot of our legal services you cannot just put a fixed price out there without analyzing the data, because it all depends on so many different factors, right? So it became fixed price for a certain scope of work depending on these conditions. If conditions change, the fixed price would change, right? So we had to be quite creative in the way we communicated those fixed prices. And I think one thing that we did very well in Faskin and in Wilson Sonsini after that was to build products centered around foundation on AI, but centered around predicting the price of a certain outcome given certain factors. So really, it was so simple. You ask the client certain questions initially, like a typical AI model, answer the quiz, right? 5 to 10 questions. And based on those 5 to 10 answers, the model will predict a price. Okay, given these situations, we predict the price for this particular matter to be this much, right? Which is I think quite cool. That's where the industry is moving as well from a predictability standpoint, right? And I think it's going beyond that though. I think pricing is no longer just price and rate and fees. The conversation has moved on to profitability as well, and those same skill sets that you need for pricing, you sort of need for practice economics. You need to know the drivers of profitability, which are pricing, but sometimes you don't have control over pricing. So what else do you control? You control leverage, you control staffing optimization, right? And that's why it's the same people who are having these conversations on pricing are moving on to profitability as well. So now if you ask me what's going on with pricing, I tell you it's completely changed from just being a rate conversation to a from a legal fee perspective to really driving profitability, to putting together tech which is innovative, right, to getting teams together. I always maintained pricing as the center of the firm. It's the center of the sphere. Why I say that is because you all everyone has a stake in pricing. You ask the product people, pricing is all about product positioning. So they feel they have their own pricing because it's all about product positioning. You ask the marketing people and they'll tell you pricing is one of the 4 Ps, Porter's 4 Ps, right? So it belongs to marketing, right? You ask the sales guys, they'll tell you pricing is all about tactics and discounts, so it belongs to us. We have control over pricing. You ask the finance guys, they'll tell you pricing is all about margin, right? Profitability. So we get to control pricing, right? So it's actually from being a point of conflict, if you think about it, it can really be an opportunity to get people together and be the linchpin in setting together the right operational strategy for the firm to move on, right? So that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. I saw this as an opportunity to get the firm together, right? And all the facets of the firm together. And I think that's why my own career has evolved from being a pricing professional to an operations professional, right? And then now it's more financial, but still it's financial operations, so to speak, and strategy, right? Because I've chosen that path, right? I've looked at pricing that way. Pricing has a lot of strength. It really is as big as you want it to be. It's like the mind, I would say. If your mind is small, the pricing will be small. If your mind is big, the pricing will be big as well. So that's just how I look at it. Um, I may be digressing, so Ben, put me back in my tracks if you think I need to talk about something specifically.
You brought us beautifully. I love the way that you developed us from where you were to where we're at. And you brought us very nice to the linchpin. And that's kind of like the substantive. So I want to unpack this because I love the idea of
Yeah.
being a linchpin, a hub on which everybody can circle on. Before we get there, though, I want to talk about the psychology and specifically the internal dynamics of making these changes. Now, of course, and you're smiling, of course, other people can't see you, but I can see you. You're smiling because good ideas have to meet sort of the real world circumstances of where they're at. And you've used change to describe some of what you've done before. And I think you recognize that, you have to work where the center of gravity tends to be. And in pricing, for better or for worse, despite our great ideas that we've just fleshed out, there's still a center of gravity around predictability of the billable hour as it relates to sort of the historical markers of where law firms have been, at least contemporary law firms in sort of like the post Latham partnership model that sort of came out at the turn of the century, and the billable hour sort of fit very well into that, arguably because of other reasons, I think, in terms of the cost. But the bigger point is, how do you broach, as a pricing professional, how have you started to broach the ideas of moving from where we are now to where we can inevitably go? Great ideas, of course, are fantastic, but you understand the trump of my question. How have you done that sort of internally to getting that sort of like
Yeah.
buy-in?
Absolutely. It's a really good question. I think you've got to think beyond the numbers and think from a, you got to have the right soft skills. You have to invest a lot in the soft skills. You have to invest a lot in empathy. You got to invest a lot in listening. It's true. I spent a lot of time in both in Wilson, Sonsini, and Fasken, just listening to lawyers and interviewing them and understanding their pain. And maybe my background in strategy helped me do that because you had to, right, to understand what the pain was. And I realized, okay, I'm not trying to impose any solution on them. I'm just trying to address their pain, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. And when I did that, I got buy-in, right? I got buy-in to address. It wasn't. I mean, quite often we have a, rather than going with a preset idea of what that change needs to be, just go and listen to the pain and work together in involving addressing the problem, right? That's flexibility as well. It's really important. And so yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it also is also the billable hour, right? There's a lot of when I go to conferences, I see a lot of frustration among, not a criticism, right? I also had that frustration among pricing professionals and everyone else on the billable hour. The billable hour is coming to an end. It's horrible. It's a block and everything. But I chose a different path. I saw that and I said, look, we need to embrace the billable hour. We need to actually welcome it and hug it, right, so to speak, and not fight it, because if you fight it, you're fighting the universe that you're in it, right, so to speak, and you're going against the grain of, you're going against the current, right, so to speak. So I didn't go with that mentality at all. I incorporate value-based pricing with the billable hour, and I find there's value to that. If you think about the billable hour, it's time, right? You're measuring time, and there's a relationship between time and value, right? Assuming what you're doing is productive, assuming you're productive, right? Let's check that box. If you're productive, then the more time you spend on a certain task, chances are there's a greater value attached to that task as well, right? Because it's you spend more time. Your time is of value. There's no doubt about that. And so if you can find a way to connect the dot between time, value, and price, I think you have a winner there, right? So that's what I did. I went and connected the dots between time, value, and price in all the conversations. It was value-based pricing, but it didn't ignore time. It brought that into the conversation in the solution. And when I did that, I realized that I had a lot more allies, right? And than people who were resisting. They no longer resisted because they were like, he's talking our language, so to speak. The other thing is productivity. We spoke about productivity as well. Keep in mind, law firms work on productivity. They measure time, in and out. They measure how many hours every person puts in. How many hours are billed, how many hours are worked on. So it's not going to go away. I mean, it is a measure of productivity. And I think that's another reason why we need to, accept that, right? In many ways, in our calculations as we talk about value-based pricing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I want to, before we leave this, and I want to get into the linchpin because I'm really excited about sort of seeing how we can think about it as sort of like the hub. But before that, I want to ask one last question about the jump from billable hour. And I love the way that you thought, go with the grain, incorporate, transcend, but include it and understand that it has its role and it has its value. Let's jump from there, though, to value-based pricing, because that in and of itself is also a psychological shift, or it's some sort of new embrace in value. I like big pricing can be big small mind, small pricing, big mind, big, or however you put it, very very succinctly. But value-based pricing is an incredibly big jump from the idea of time to labor as it translates to price. Value pricing for many law firms still seems to be, and for clients, if we can bring in the client perspective, can sometimes still be like a black box. So you want to talk a little bit about, well, just how do we frame the idea of value pricing? What are we talking about, and what importantly needs to happen so that you can see through the window of value-based pricing moving forward after a world of time equals money based on a market rate for services, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good question, right? As a pricing professional, you think about value, perceived value of your products in the client's mind, right? That's value-based pricing. So really, if give an example of a of a lawyer, right, of attorney. He gets a call from a client, and it's a 10-minute phone call, and the attorney tells the client in 10 minutes that informs them of a certain risk that they face, and the client takes the advice, and with the result, they save $10 million. Like, well, now, what would the lawyer price for that transaction? Is it going to be 1/10 of their time for the hour, or is it going to be a small percentage, maybe 2% of the $10 million that they saved, right? So if it's 2% of the $10 million, that's value-based pricing. The client has saved $10 million, and you've taken a subset of it, which is 2%, right? Rather than charging, if your rate is, let's say, $1,000 an hour, you've charged them $100 because you spoke to them only for 10 minutes or whatever have you, right? So that's the opportunity that value-based pricing has, right? But this is only possible if you have a understanding with the client, right, as to what how you want to monetize, your value, right? So I'm remember speaking about how we want to measure value. I think it all goes down to how we're measuring value internally in a law firm, how we're putting together products, around value, right? Packages, right? Scenarios, even the scope of work, right? This is a big one, right? Scope of work. Law firms have a scope of work for everything that they do. The scope is really, in a way, it's a it's a document of value, right, that you're providing to the client. It can be presented in the form of value. This is what we will do for you, and but it should not be task based. It should be value driven. This is the benefit you'll receive from it, right? Not just what we'll do for you, but what is the benefit that you'll receive from it. So that's when value based marketing comes in. It's you can't have the pricing guys do all of this. The marketing guys have to step in and do this, right? And then the lawyers have to communicate and sell on value, and that's when value based selling comes in, right? So it's all of that, right? And I don't know if I'm digressing again. I tend to do that in pricing because the world is so big for me when pricing. I don't know where I go. So so if I am,
Let's
correct
go
me.
there now. Let's
Yeah,
go there now.
yeah,
Let's jump into the
yeah,
idea of the linchpin. You've brought us up to there, and you've said, okay, it's a new world. We're looking out through a new window. Let's go through the idea of, and let's start with value based marketing and selling as kind of the spin. Because from my mind, the work is still being delivered in some sense. Maybe you can get into packaging and pricing and products, but
yeah.
let's start marketing, sales, and communicating value, because in some sense the rubber really hits the road in that capacity, especially in the sales conversation. So you want to bring us up to there,
Yeah.
and if you want, you can maybe tie in the idea of it being a linchpin if you maybe want to rehash that a little bit, but I'll let it to you as kind of this model as to the linchpin. I think it's probably clear, at least it's clear in my mind, how it's starting to touch all corners of the organization. But yeah, go where you want.
Okay, sure. It's what I meant by value-based pricing. It needs to be communicated. You have to write. You got to have the right content internally generated, and that's where marketing comes in. They can generate the right content around the right messages around value, not keep the conversation task-based, but keep it more on the value that the client would get from it and how the clients would benefit from it, right? And marketing in partnership with the pricing folks can come in really well here, right? In producing the right material, and putting it out there, whether it's on a website, whether it's through brochures, whether it's sending materials to the client, whether it's through webinars, whether it's through events. We did a lot of that in Faskin to help the conversation with the client, and I think that helps. All of that helps. Then you come to the lawyer, which in a law firm, the attorney is a very powerful person. The attorney is the product guy, the attorney is the sales guy, the attorney is the shareholder as well, right? So it's like, okay, you got a lot of hats that you got to play, and so as a sales guy, the attorney, right? So you got to be able to teach the attorney this is what, rather than focusing on the task that you're doing, a great way to communicate to the client is through the material that marketing has produced, right, so to speak, and you can talk to it, and quite often the content that marketing writes is written in a way that the attorneys can just take forward and talk to it, right, in a way to in their negotiations. So that's value-based selling. It's no longer you're no longer haggling on rates. You're no longer haggling on time. You're talking about the value that you're bringing in for a certain transaction. So, for example, if an M&A transaction, you're talking about the negotiation that you're doing with the number of parties involved, right? Rather than just the time. So, okay, if there are 15 parties involved, it's going to be a bigger price versus 5 parties involved, right? Because it's more complex with 15 parties versus only 5 parties. So you start to break it down, break out the transaction into the different, factors that add to the value of the product that you're putting out there. And that's the job of pricing and marketing with the help of the attorneys. But then the attorneys have to sell it based on that too, right? Sell it based on the fact that, okay, I'm charging you this much, $10,000 for the negotiation because there were 5 people involved. I'll charge you $150,000 if there are 15 people involved, right? So it's no longer based on the hour. You base it on what? You base it on the number of people because it gets more complex when there are more parties involved versus the hour. It doesn't matter if that 15-person negotiation happens in 1 hour because you've been so efficient about it, or if the 10-person negotiation happened in 15 hours because you've been inefficient, or it just happened that way. The price that you pay is based on the value of that transaction. So that's the disconnect. See, that's when we decouple revenue from hour, right? We're decoupling that metric, and I think that's important. We started to do that, and I think that's where pricing comes in. Um, and that's where the law firms can maximize profits too. And now this conversation to be had with the finance folks is different. They're like, you know what? The best way to do this is to maximize profitability, and the way I would do that is by value-based pricing. So you get buy-in from them because of that. They don't care if you're how you're doing it; they just care about maximizing profit. So the way that you would do it is like this, right? So you decouple. When I spoke about decoupling rate and revenue, you decouple time with revenue with value and revenue, right? And I think the finance folks would get that, so to speak. So it's that's how you would sort of be the linchpin, right, in this example of getting people together to align on a strategy going forward, right? And once you do that repetitively a few times, you can build products around it. You can mainstream it, right, so to speak. And then people understand it. They're like, yeah, this makes sense. It's simpler. Um, yeah, so it's that's one example.
So before we get into, and I want to get into pricing and packaging and service offerings specifically, and I was thinking about how many businesses structure their pricing and packaging, which is they understand that they want a certain top line revenue number. They know that they want to sell to reach that certain number of packages and services to reach that top line revenue. They know their operating costs, they know their expenses, their EBITDA, all the rest of it. And so they start thinking in terms of conversion. How much pipeline do we need? How much of that do we need to sell to actually reach that end number, et cetera, et cetera. It's in that scenario, the core is the idea of that you can sell a certain product at a certain cost and be able to deliver that at some conversion rate minus the expenses to get to an end revenue number. That never, I don't think that conversation does not happen that much within law firms, but it seems to be the corner of it is really around service or packaging of products within the context of a very fixed fee. What's wrong with that model? Why doesn't that work? How far are we from that in law firms today, and maybe even in that thinking? And that's thinking from a very finance perspective and revenue goal perspective, of course.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ben. I think it's a very good. I think it in a way I'll answer it slightly differently. I'll say that it does happen, and you'll be surprised as to why he's saying that, right? It happens in a different way, right? Now it happens in a different way. I'm the CFO, so I do these things, and what I'm projecting is not the packages that every practice area is going to sell, because those packages have not even been developed. But what I'm projecting is the number of hours they're going to be working, right? So to speak, and how number of hours are they going to be billing by practice area for the rate they're going to be billing. So I'm breaking it down by the hours and the rate, but really I'm still doing that. I'm still projecting. And that's when I came to earlier on my point. We are measuring productivity in law firms by the hours, right, that we work and bill. And if that's going to be the way we do things, measure productivity, it's going to be a while since we change that metric and have something else and replace it, which is number of packages that we're selling, number of litigation cases, number of M&A deals. Now, in a way, in a way that is happening also, because if I ask the M&A team today, I need the total number of hours that you're going to be working on this year, and the number of people, attorneys that you're going to recruit, if you plan to recruit more people. They'll tell me, okay, I need to recruit 10 more people this year, and at an average of 1,700 hours per person, they're going to be working 10 more. Why do they come? How do they come up with 10 more people? Because they feel there'll be enough M&A deals in the market for them to recruit more people. So they're doing the math internally, right? But they're giving me the answer in terms of hours. I need 10 more people these many hours, right? But these practice folks are actually doing that math. Okay, there's going to be at least 15% more M&A deals this year because we're coming out of a recession, the interest rates are coming down, whatever have you, right? I'm just putting a hypothetical scenario out there. They're doing that math internally. Um, to come to a the translating that market dynamic to the hours and headcount that the finance team needs to project the numbers. That's really what they're doing. So in a way that so it's happening in a law firm, it's just happening at different departments to it, right? The attorneys are doing it, the partners are doing it, to get to that to connect the dots with finance. But yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah. But to your point on, have we reached a stage where we can just ask them? It's not. To be honest with you, the attorneys are not finance professionals. They don't have spreadsheets that connect the dots really easily. It's a lot. A lot is in their minds. It'll take us guys, the finance guys, to proactively reach out to them and find a way to connect their own dots, right? And ask them, okay, how many M&A deals? 15 M&A deals, fine. What does that translate to in terms of hours? We can do the work, but we'll have to be proactive enough to reach out to them. I think that's where the disconnect is.
Yes,
Yeah.
amazing. We're coming to the end. You've been so gracious with your time, talking about time. And I want to wrap up. You've brought us all the way up to value based pricing. I want to see what's the future. You've painted many. We've painted many different worlds here. We've painted the world of packaging and pricing. We've painted the world of value based pricing and the change. We've painted the world where billable hours are there, but taking a productivity standpoint. And then all of these integrating. Where are we going? Where could we possibly go moving forward? Let's say with products that are not even purchased. Of course, we're thinking about software products that are sort of sold and delivered. We're thinking about different sort of modes of even delivering end value. What's possible today in this world of pricing, profitability, specifically for the law firm, and maybe where we're going. And we'll go ahead and wrap up after that. You've been so gracious with your time.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So it's pricing is multifaceted. So you'll have sort of growth in a number of areas. When it comes to the client, you will see a lot of AFA growth and creativity around AFAs, alternative fee arrangement. That's already happening, and that's going to carry on. The clients love to see creativity and give them different options. When it comes internally, there will be innovation around pricing products, predictability. So any scenario, any legal case, right? Litigation or transactional or whatever have you, the answer should not be it depends on situations. We should know if it depends on these situations, the price would be so and so, right? So it is you're building those models internally, those products where it can, where the model would predict exactly what price that certain transaction would be, right? Given those certain factors. That's definitely a future, and it's already happening. In fact, I see it happening, and I was part of it. The other part is profitability. I mean, these same folks who do the pricing are also savvy enough to connect the dots between pricing, profitability, and if you can control price or you can't control price, what else can you control to move the profit lever, right? And then it's staffing optimization, leverage, building the right models around that, and that's a lot. We did a lot of that in Wilson Sonsini and my previous role and my current role as well, in helping law firms be more profitable at the end of the day. So the same mentality, the same people are driving that conversation too. So it's multifaceted, and it's going to grow in that direction. It's going to be a multifaceted approach to the impact pricing has, right? In all areas. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. We're gonna have you back on to really, I maybe talk about the productivity side and of course the cost side in some sense. Very interesting in and of itself to how that could actually model out profitability and increasing profitability. So we'll have to have you back on the
Yeah.
podcast at some time soon to see how you're thinking about that. Why don't you tell us about the next 6 months, or let's say the 5.5 months that we have remaining in the year? Where are you going to be? Anywhere that we can connect with you? See you talking a little bit more about this. Yeah, tell us about forecast out the next couple of years. Anything that we should be looking out for?
No, I'm going to be here in San Diego. I think it's a great place, and I've made this move. With the family's going to be moving here soon, and we're in transition. It's a great firm, Procopio, and I'm being the CFO. And what I'm doing is I'm transforming an accounting division into a finance organization, right? So think of accounting, back office, finance, front office, client focused, right? Emphasis on profitability, influence, and all of that. So it's strategic, right? And so it's a fantastic challenge. Great people to support and to work with. We already have great people in the team, so it's really good to when that happens, the task is a lot simpler. So I think it's great. I think it's I'm really happy where I am right now. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Varun, thank you so much for sitting down on the podcast,
Yeah.
sharing your legal life with us. And we will
Yeah.
absolutely have to have you back on. Any final words? Anything else that you want to share? Otherwise, we're going to go ahead
No.
and wrap up. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Ben, for inviting me and have given me this opportunity to talk to you guys. And it was great. It was good to have to connect. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This was another This Legal Life podcast. I sat down with Varun Bahl today, and we will be back with another. If you like this podcast, please like, share, all the rest of it. So tell the algorithm what you want and need to see. And yeah, we'll be coming back very soon with another podcast. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Varun. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.